Hi, and welcome to Toronto Talk Show. Today we're talking with the author, Thea Ramsey, about her book, Lucy. Hi, Thea.
Hi, Angela. How's it going?
I'm good. How are you?
Pretty good. A
So
lot of
tell
women.
me about Thea, Miss Thea Ramsey, the author.
Well, I've been writing since before I could spell. Or one time I was writing a story, and I have a good long memory. And I remember spelling the word magic, Madjik. So it's anybody's guess how old I must have been, maybe 5 or 6. Because once I learned to spell, I was crackerjack at it. So I was writing long before I could spell words. And as soon as I knew how to read and write Braille, I was writing stories.
That's awesome. You're saying speak and read Braille?
Yeah, as soon as I could write and read and write Braille, I was writing stories.
Blind from birth or
No residual sight or anything like that. Sight is a world I have no idea about. I don't know what
and you wrote a book.
I wrote a few books. That was
That's
one.
excellent. How do you come up with description?
I try to do like my grade 11 English teacher said, which is to write what you know. So I will do research to try to talk to see what things are like in terms of if I can get a verbal description of something. And I do read a lot too. So when you read a lot, hopefully some of that stuff stays in your memory. But I really couldn't I really couldn't write, for instance, a car chase very intelligently because I don't have any perception of how the streets are, how streets run and how blocks run and how intersections are crossed and things like that. So if I was to write a car chase scene, it probably wouldn't be very good.
Okay,
But so I
okay.
use my other four senses and what little I know from hearsay from sighted people. But mostly it's my own four senses and my own emotion and thought life.
Now, did you do any schooling for writing?
I've done some writing courses. I'm working on it's called a do-it-yourself MFA. When I get through this course, I'll have a Master of Fine Arts without the diploma. Here I'm working with is very keen on accessibility, so um, it's kind of expensive, but I'll tell anybody about her, especially because if there are I know there are other blind writers, and I'm also on a couple of blind writer lists, email lists.
Nice.
So I'm kind of connected, try to stay connected with writers. And reading, of course, is one way to stay connected with writers because when you read their stuff, you think about if I were writing this, how would I do it? If I didn't like it, what was it that I didn't like? Or if I could do it better, how would I have written it? That kind of thing.
Well,
But
I know
yeah,
you try to stay connected because I was doing an event and you found me a few years ago, right? The event that I hosted was
promoting and marketing.
right about marketing and promotion
Yeah.
downtown Toronto.
Hmm.
And you got in touch with me and you asked if it was wheelchair accessible. And at the time, I didn't know. So I called the venue and they said yes. So I got back to you and I said, yes, it is wheelchair accessible. And then you popped a question. You said, well, I just want you to know that I'm blind. And I was thinking, there goes my whole presentation. Like my presentation consists of games and, you got an hour to fill.
Right.
And I just thought, okay, Thea, okay, I don't know how to work this, and I'm not going to change my presentation. It's too short timeline. So I said, I'll come to you.
That's
And
right.
that was a great move. I had so much fun. All our meetings, but our first meeting was really fun. What would you want to voice today if there's anyone out there listening that can help uh, the blind people that write today?
Well, I mean, there's Amazon really needs to think about not just making their books readable to blind people. Hello, Amazon. Y'all need to think about blind writers as well, because I paid an awful lot of money that I don't have because I'm on ODSP, and money that I'll be paying off for a good long while to publish readable and fun books for for sighted folks to read. And you guys haven't done a thing to make your videos
Platform.
accessible.
Okay.
Okay, they're not even sure they want to make it accessible for blind readers. And there's a lot of talk about critical race theory. Like if you're white, you're supposed to be kind of racist, and if homophobic and all that. But nobody ever says ableist. If you're able-bodied, that there's probably an ableist. There's ableist tendencies lurking in you. Like how many blind? Like if you read a book about romance, how many heroines are there that are blind? How many leading men? How many leading ladies in science fiction are deaf or hard of hearing? How many leading men in science fiction, say, or fantasy, are in a wheelchair? Not too
But
damn
yet,
many.
but yet, your novel, is your character blind in your novel?
There is one blind character.
Oh,
Yeah. Oh,
okay.
yeah. There's one blind character.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how would you describe
There's also a
the,
little character in the.
pardon?
There's also a little person in the book as well.
Excellent. How would you describe, for example, I'm Jamaican,
Right?
dark skin. How do you know how to describe that? The different shades of colors.
I don't. I've never seen color. I've never seen light. Hey, for all I know, you guys could all be telling me a big fat conspiracy story that there's this thing called sight that exists, and that's the reason you can get a driver's license and I can't. You guys could all be telling me a pack of lies, but I guess not. I'm just kidding. But I don't. I just don't have any experience with sight. Whatever. I don't. Not even light or sunshine. Or I can feel the sun, but I can't see it. So.
But is it fair to say, because I remember in one of our meetings, you said, when I asked you a question similar, you said you start singing the song, Jesus loved the little, um,
Children, yeah, yeah.
right,
That,
right?
yeah, that's how I created the races for my characters in the book Lucy, because she doesn't
Okay,
live on Earth for some of the book. She lives on another planet. She goes to another planet and lives there.
okay.
And a sighted person actually asked me, "What color are these people?" And I'm like, "Gee whiz, I don't know." So I was thinking, from Jesus loves the little children, red and yellow, black and white. And I was thinking, all I need to do is find other words to that mean the same thing, and I could create the races of these people that live on the planet Lucy goes to live on.
Hmm.
Yeah,
That's excellent. So, Lucy is from Earth.
correct.
There was a war going on.
Mm-hmm.
Her parents end up getting killed.
That's correct. Yeah,
The book journeys through, she and her best friend escape to another planet,
that's correct.
right? And in
Yeah.
this planet, it's all full of love and joy and everything serene and
Mm,
tranquil and peaceful,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Am I getting this so far?
Yep.
And uh, you find a correlation between that world and the world that we live in today with the pandemic.
Well, in 20 that Lucy was published in 2018.
Mm-hmm.
I had, of course, no idea that less than 2 years after my book was published, we'd be living in a world where it's now considered it's not okay to touch and hug and be with people. Like for instance, I haven't been out of my apartment in more than a year because I don't have any family or friends or whatever, so that can take me out. Because now if I was just blind, I would could walk out, or if I was just in a wheelchair, I could wheel out. But because I'm both, it's. But anyway, that's another thing. But the people of Andorpha, where Lucy lives, they worship love in all of its forms, particularly romantic love, but all the other types too. And isolation, there's no word for in Andorfian, there's no word for orphan. There's no word for widow. There's no word for because there's no loneliness on that planet.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying it's a perfect world, but I'm saying loneliness is just not a part of any Andorfian's experience. But how would I have, obviously it was a God thing because When I published this novel in 2018, I had no idea what was coming around the corner. This
I don't think anybody
isolation,
did.
huh?
I don't think anybody did.
No, nobody did.
Right.
But the amount of just bone crushing isolation that people are living with today, and I don't hear too much about the mental health risks that staying away from others because of this pandemic has caused. I don't hear a lot about that. I hear
Yeah,
a lot of
well,
people talking.
there is.
I hope so.
Absolutely. It's sad. I would not to hope so, but it's a reality.
It is.
Um,
It's.
so who were your mentor? Who did you look up to growing up, being blind, like, and to give you such a drive and passion in the arts?
I Well, a lot of the people that I liked were like Ray Charles and Earth, Wind and Fire and Earth, Wind and Fire, of course, and DeBarge, and like these were black people who could sing and play, and I wanted to sing and play at one point, but writing writing kind of stood in the background for a while I lived my life, while I did some singing and keyboard playing, and while I did some acting in community theater. Loved doing that. And there was a group, CNIB had a group, or hosted a group of blind actors called the Glendale Players. I was in a couple of things, a couple of plays there, and I did some acting with sighted groups. So by the time I was 40-ish, I felt like, gee, I really have more to say now. I think writing is an older person thing. Like, what can you write about when you're 18? You know what I mean?
Well, you do need some wisdom. Yeah.
Yeah. And, I mean, obviously, now the gal that read her poem on the inauguration of President Joe Biden, she was only, what, 17 or 18? That was
Hmm.
a lovely poem. I just mean, if you're going to write a story that's got a lot of depth in it, you need to find some depth.
Yes,
And
you do.
in order to do that, you need to have experiences, good ones, bad ones, nice ones, crazy ones, you know,
Yeah,
make
talking
mistakes.
about nice ones, crazy ones, how did you develop your characters? Like, how did your book protagonist, antagonist, meet, twist, blah, blah, blah? But being a blind person, how did you go about writing that?
You mean like physically, like, or do you mean like the process, like the mental
The
process?
process.
Oh, well, I don't know. It was just kind of because I discovered that the fields I wanted to get into, like acting and singing, are not only terribly inaccessible, and although I was fairly good at those things, but I wasn't as good as the people I adored. And I found myself just adoring people. And I thought, gee, I I just adore these people. I love these people, and I can't be them. And I thought, what if there was a world that was like that, where there's a lot of people loving on each other, and I just, and the whole idea of Andorpha came out of my own marriage, which was far less than ideal. And we lived in Hawaii, which was a love. We lived on Maui, which is like a magical island. But I discovered that living in paradise didn't make things last. So Andorpha is a very cold place. It's freezing, and the people there are covered with a very good, nice, soft, thick fur. So Lucy loves the summer, and she ends up going to a place that's winter all year round.
Ah,
Yeah, and there's a story saying that the winter was brought on by a curse, and so Lucy, of course, she doesn't go for superstitious stuff. I mean, if you're a kid going through war, I guess you grow up pretty quickly.
yeah.
And, one of the criticisms I had about the book was that the children, according to the reader, the children didn't sound like children. And I thought, well, how would you sound if you'd been, like some of these kids that live in war torn countries,
Yeah.
Some,
Well, it's true. Good
see,
point.
how would they sound? But they don't sound like our 11 and 12-year-olds. When I'm reading, I'm sitting in my imaginary theater, munching on imaginary popcorn, which isn't as good as the real stuff, by the way. It's not nearly as good as the real stuff, but you can say it has 0 calories. Anyway, I'm I'm sitting in the theater, listening to my stories from the big screen, the voices of the
What
characters.
age group you think would enjoy this?
Well, I know there's a 10-year-old girl read it, and she was interested in writing, so she'd always come to me when we had church, when I was able to go out and go to church. She would come, and she told me it was quite imaginative. She really enjoyed reading it, and I've seen older people have read it. Um, I think it might be a good, because some parts are very intense. I wouldn't necessarily share it with your 6-year-old, but the characters are like 10 and 11 and 12, so maybe you wouldn't want to go much below that,
Okay.
you know.
Okay. And is it sci-fi fiction? What
I,
is it?
I would call it sort of a sci-fi fantasy. I would say it's more sci-fi. It's more fantasy than sci-fi, perhaps, just
Okay.
because I'm not scientifically proficient. So,
Yeah. And if you had a magic wand and
mm,
you could use it right now, what would be the wish for you uh, with this book?
well, um, first of all, I'd like to pay off all my bills. Second of all,
Hills.
well, second of all, $750 something a month when you're disabled.
Sales. So
Well,
we're talking about sales.
I know we are
Yeah.
talking about sales.
Right. Where there's a will, there's a way. You certainly have that kind of focus and drive,
Yeah.
and that's one thing I really love about you is your drive.
And
And I wish that this book takes off for you. Um,
because Lucy's story isn't told only in this one book, so I'm working on her continuing story.
okay.
Yeah.
So how many books do you think you'll end up having with Lucy?
Well, I don't know if there's not gonna be seven.
Okay.
Maybe four, maybe five. Kind of like the Twilight series. Um,
Okay.
but we'll
But
just
you're
see.
on book number one
I've
and
done book
working
number
on
one, I'm
book
working
number
on book
two.
number two. Yeah.
Excellent.
So,
Wow. You just amaze me. I'm just like, um, there's a lot of times there's feeds that come on Twitter and it says, ask questions, and people say, well, I I want to write, but it's and I'm thinking, I know a girl, she can't see and she can't use paper to pen and she still gets what she wants done. You wrote.
yeah.
And that's amazing. That
And
is simply amazing. Especially you would think technology would catch up to meet your needs, but they still have a long way to go.
oh, honestly, this is, I mean, organizations like BLM don't seem to dig ableism.
What do you think that one problem you mentioned just now is a downfall? So if there's somebody from that company watching, they could say, boy, maybe what is it that you find really awkward?
Well, look, the Canadians with Disabilities Act has been around, for a while now. I'm sick and tired of companies, any company that I call, saying, I'm sorry doesn't get it anymore. This is 2021, for heck's sakes.
Yeah,
I'm
but
gonna get
what is it that they don't get?
Well, they don't want to bother with making their sites accessible or making their programs accessible. And
What
it's
do you find that is not accessible?
okay, for instance, if see on Amazon you can publish your book for free. You don't have to spend $1,000 or $10,000 to get your book published.
Right.
But and it's a lot of fun too. You pick out images, pick your layout, you pick all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
But the layouts and the images have to have tags and labels assigned to them so that a blind person could do the same thing. I
So
could do
the
it.
program you use can read it
Yeah.
and tell it to you, but that's not integrated in their system. So you have to hire outside source.
If Amazon, they're not even sure if they want to go to the trouble of making their books accessible to blind readers. They're not even thinking about us writers. All they have to do is label things. All the internet, the website developer has to do is label things, label images, label, you know, elements that I can say, okay, this image would look really great for this book, and I can do it my own self. I don't need to pay thousands of dollars that I don't have. I could do it my own self.
Okay, got it. So basically, they need to label the
Yeah.
site
Yes,
so
and
that
there are
program you
tons
use
and
is
tons.
able to read it so that you can decipher what's the next step.
Right, and there are tons and tons and tons of articles on the internet that tell a developer how to make a website accessible. So sorry doesn't get it for me. It
It
doesn't.
is available on Amazon,
Mm-hmm.
and you've got some preview pages people could read before they purchase, even,
Yeah,
which is
good.
Thea Ramsey, a non-seeing person that is accomplished a few goals, and one of them is this book, and I can't wait to check it out further.
Okay, well, you know where it is.
Very true. It's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.